Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Recovering Tariff Costs, a conversation on refunds, a topic that is very important to so many of us right now. I'm Pete Theran, CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and I'll be your host for this session, which is presented by the HFA. We want this to be a highly interactive session. We encourage you to post questions throughout the conversation using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer as many of your questions as we can. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is recorded and will be available on demand at myhfa.org/webinar. And in fact, that is the most popular way that people access our webinars. Thank you to Synchrony, our education thought leadership sponsor, for their dedication to the industry and support of these webinars. This is a timely and important topic for furniture retailers and other direct importers across the home furnishing supply chain. As developments around IEEPA tariffs and refunds continue to unfold, many businesses are trying to understand what these changes mean in practical terms, especially when tariff costs may have been paid directly or were passed through by suppliers. Two different situations. Today's discussion is designed to help clarify where things stand right now, what retailers should be paying attention to, and what actions make the most sense. Joining me is Steve Fodor, founder and CEO of Custom Services and Solutions. Steve founded the firm in 2003 and brings more than 30 years of experience in international trade, logistics, and customs brokerage. As a longtime licensed customs broker and master customs specialist, he works closely with importers on customs clearance, compliance, and duty-related challenges, making him very qualified to help us unpack this issue. Steve's firm is a new partner of the Home Furnishings Association at a time when customs brokers have an importance in our industry like never before. Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Peter. I'm very happy to be here today. And, we're in a rather trying time and have been for, really a little over a year and a few months now. So, I'm here to answer questions. And even after the webinar is over, I'd be more than glad to deal with more specific questions. As you said, I've been at this a long time. It's actually year 42. My hair grayed up more in the last year than the first 41. But yes, I'm here to answer questions, and I will be glad to do so.
Well, let's begin with kind of setting where things stand today, what retailers should understand about the current environment. Steve, for those who may be hearing a lot about IEEPA tariff refunds, but are still trying to connect the dots, can you give us a plain English overview of what has happened so far in that regard?
The IEEPA tariffs, it's kind of an overarching term for two tariffs that were implemented starting in April of 2025. The first was the most common one, the reciprocal tariffs, and I think anyone that imports had some experience with those tariffs. They started at one level, they changed along the way, they shot up very high for China, then back down. Other countries had their own specific rates for a period of time. And then toward the end, they all pretty much fell in one rate basket. So that was the main one of the IEEPA tariffs. The other one was known as the fentanyl tariff. And that was an additional tariff that was applied to products from a number of countries due to the fentanyl, illegal fentanyl supply chain issues. So we had these two tariffs. They took effect in April of 2025. They were very significant. The government estimates that they collected about 160 to 180 billion dollars in IEEPA tariffs. That was challenged in the courts. And in February, on February 20th, the Supreme Court ruled that the IEEPA tariffs were not legal and therefore had to be terminated. The administration ended those tariffs 4 days later on February 24th. So we had all this money collected for about a 14-month period. The tariffs were ruled illegal. Now what? that's where we're at today. In the second phase, which is now the process of customs refunding those duties to the importer of record, along with an interest that accumulated over the time that that money was in customs hands. So that's
So,
kind of the high
Steve,
overview. Sure.
yeah, well, so the Supreme Court ruled.
Yes.
The administration largely did not push back or hardly even comment on the Supreme Court ruling. It seemed like we moved to a refund process very quickly. So do you think that means we're at a stage where businesses should expect certainty, or is this specific thing still a dynamic situation, or is it done now? And now we're in solidly in that refund phase.
Well, we have an appeal deadline that's approaching, and I think that is set for June 6th. So between now and June 6th, sure, an appeal could be lodged by the administration against not so much the ruling of the Supreme Court, because it's really not, they're not able to appeal that. They could appeal the lower court's rulings that are tied to the Supreme Court ruling. I have not heard, other than a few social media posts, that that's even a threat. And to be honest, at this point, Customs has started refunding some of that money. So I think if there was any plan to appeal, they would have slow walked the refund process.
Okay. So we probably, but as you said, June is the date when we'll
Yeah,
know for sure.
yes,
But this probably is a stable situation. A mix. I mean, the whole tariff world has been very, very dynamic, but this
right.
particular aspect of it is probably fairly stable at this point. So as we're kind of looking at this, let's talk a little bit about who would be eligible for refunds. Can you explain, now that we've framed the overall landscape, let's talk specifically about eligibility and who might have a path. Can you explain why the importer of record is so central to the refund process and who is most likely to have a direct path to recovering funds?
Definitely the importer of record. So, we've all heard that even consumers are saying, well, what about us? We paid a portion of that tariff in higher prices. Are we going to get refunds? That's a totally separate issue outside of the court ruling. The court ruling said to U.S. Customs, you must refund the monies to the importer of record who paid those duties to U.S. Customs. So that money is coming back to the importer of record. Let me add to that, though, they must take action to recover that money. If they do nothing, the money will not be returned. So the avenue to receive the refund is there. They have to actually take the steps to recover that. So it
So
would
to
go to the importer of record.
but to clarify, and you made a very good point in that is, if you are a retailer who is not the importer of record, but you paid surcharges of some sort or just higher prices, there will not be a court ruling that aids you in recovering some of that money, even if your supplier is going to recover money. That's a business relationship question, not a court ruling question. That's how I would summarize it. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The only thing that the court ruling dealt with was the refund of duties from U.S. Customs to the importer of record. All other parties who may be involved, whether it was a retailer that purchased from an importer and even further downstream to the actual consumer, that's more of a business relationship question than it is a court question, though there are a few class action lawsuits that I've heard being filed where uh, retailers or even all the way down to consumers are trying to get an angle where they can legally recover the money. But I kind of believe that that may be a dead end. I think it's more in the business relationship.
Well, and our focus for this conversation really is about the importer of record part of
Correct.
it. That
Sure.
we may down the road spend more time talking about retailers recovering from suppliers who are the importer of record, but that's not really what we're focused on today. But we did want to clarify that. So, okay, if you are an importer of record, you are a retailer or perhaps a manufacturer who is sourcing from overseas. What documentation and internal records should retailers, importers of record be gathering now so that they're prepared to file and file well for their refund?
Right. It's going to be important that they gather the information because customs is not going to help these importers of record recover the money. They will process the refund claims, but they won't go out of their way to help you. So every importer, and this is across the board, needs to be signed up for a customs ACE account. That's an electronic portal that's available to importers. It's secure. Importers have their own login credentials. But once an importer goes into that ACE portal, they can see every entry they filed, oftentimes looking back 10 years or more. Customs maintains those records tied to the importer's EIN number. So with the ACE portal, the importer can sign into the ACE. They can create a report showing all the duties they paid, and then they can even separate out which of those were IEEPA duties and are eligible for refunds. Ultimately, the importer or their broker or another party who might assist them in the process can file what's called a CAPE. Customs loves their acronyms. CAPE is a system they created pretty much on the fly that allows you to submit electronically your refund request. If I can comment further, we've already filed close to 100 claims for different customers in the Cape. The processing, there's been a few glitches along the way, but it's been relatively smooth. And we're just notified that about 10% of what we filed so far has already been approved and is now in the refund process. So Customs is moving much quicker than they originally said. They said 60 to 90 days to process and then issue refunds. We're seeing a turnaround of now, 9 days since the portal opened, 10 days.
Okay. Okay. Now, we are still very early in the process,
Correct.
particularly for importers who are trying to manage the process themselves. They are
Right.
probably wading through some of the complexity, and like I said, we're very early in the process. And you and I, over the last few days, have talked about a few situations we've been hearing as people have been struggling a little bit with the process. What are the most common errors or missteps you are seeing in planning or the actions that importers are taking to seek their refunds?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think there's a multi-part answer I'd like to give. First, it's setting up your ACE portal. For companies that haven't done that in the past, they didn't have the ACE portal set up. It can be a little problematic. We hear of a lot of people getting error messages where they go to set it up and their application doesn't move forward. It is an application process. It's done online. Customs is supposed to provide the login credentials anywhere from 3 to 7 days after that application is submitted. But we are hearing of importers that either can't get their application to go through or file their application and have gone beyond 7 days and have heard nothing back from customs. It can be a bit challenging. So that's challenge number one. Once you have your ACE portal set up, you have access to the data. But the challenge there, ACE is a wonderful tool, but it's not a user-friendly tool. So creating the reports that you need to identify the entries and the IEEPA duties you paid can be challenging. And if you don't do that correctly, you could conceivably leave money on the table. So you really want to make sure, I always, and again, this is a process you could do 100% on your own. I would not recommend it just from what I've seen from a few customers who did try to do it on their own. They ran into roadblocks and challenges, and no one at Customs is extremely helpful in helping them move forward. So I think working with your customs broker, after this call, I'd be more than glad to share my information. I'd be more than glad to help you as well if that's needed. It really can be a challenging process, and you want to do it right. If it's done right, We had a customer we filed claims for. I think they're around $2 million in expected return that they should get on their refunds. And it went through pretty much without a problem. We had a few errors kick out that we had to go back and work on, but the majority were approved, and they're now starting to see those move into the refund issuance side. So they'll start seeing money flowing quickly. If you try to do it on your own, you may run into issues that'll delay that process.
So the good news is what you're seeing so far is if you do it right, it works better than expected,
Yes.
perhaps, which is
Yes,
wonderful,
absolutely.
wonderful. I'm not sure that's what anybody expected to see, and
No,
that's
no.
wonderful. Steve, expand a little bit. You talked about preparing your reports, which is kind of the core of what you're going to hand over
Yes.
to Customs and Border Protection. Expand on that just a little bit. What are well-prepared reports to put Customs and Border Protection in position to quickly refund your money?
I mean, in the ACE portal, you need to create a report that captures your entry number, the liquidation status, which is the finalization status of your entry. You need to capture the harmonized tariff codes that were used, and you need to capture how much duty was paid on each of those harmonized tariff code lines. Then you need to be able to identify which of those tariff codes were IEEPA related and which were not. You can only file claims on IEEPA tariffs. As you all may know, there were a lot of other tariffs being collected: steel and aluminum tariffs, upholstered furniture tariffs, this new Section 122 tariff. None of those are refundable at this point in time. So you don't want to file a claim for those, or Customs will reject your claim. You want to narrow it down to only the IEEPA duties, create your claim, which the claim itself is quite simple. Once you've identified the data, all Customs wants from you at that point is a CSV file listing all of your eligible entry numbers. You'll upload that through the CAPE portal. You click a box saying that you're not committing fraud and you're swearing under penalty of law that you're not. And you transmit the claim, and the response comes back normally within minutes. Um, it is shocking, and I don't. I've worked with Customs for since 1984. I've known a lot of good people at Customs, a lot of really hardworking people. But when I heard that they were going to have to put together an entire new process for refunds in a short order under a court order to do this, they only had a period of, I think, 45 days to do it. I thought, no way can they pull this off. And I was surprised how efficient and user friendly the program really is.
You know, Steve, we just got a question from one of our attendees today, and it ties right into what I was about to ask you next. Here's the question one of our attendees asked. Said, in your experience, if I submit 15 entries on the same submission and one of the entries is not eligible for a refund, will the whole submission be kicked back? And what I was going to ask you was, what you're really describing is do the work for them. If you expect they're going to do the work to sort out what should be refunded, what won't, you're setting yourself up for failure, is what you seem to be saying. So, how would you speak to that question from one of our attendees?
That's a good question. And again, I was surprised when Customs said, even though you're submitting a large number of entries in one submission, one claim, they're able to remove any entries that don't pass their edits. So submitting a long list of entries, even entries that are not eligible, will not delay the refund on those that are eligible. The only problem with Customs, anytime you submit information or documentation to Customs, they expect you to do your due diligence. So conceivably, and I don't know that they will, just because I think they're overwhelmed, but conceivably they could penalize an importer or a customs broker who didn't do their due diligence and remove any duplicate entries, any entries that weren't eligible. But no, your claim will proceed just without that entry.
Okay. Okay. So Based on what we know right now, we're seeing better than expected results.
Yes.
However, we expect the volume of claims to start accelerating quite a bit, and we don't know how well the system will hold up as the
Right.
demand starts to ramp up rapidly.
Right.
So that remains to be seen. I can't help just focusing on what we've been saying a few times here is make it as easy as possible for customs to say yes. Submit your information in a very organized way, submit your information in a very accurate way, submit your information in a way that doesn't ask them to do any work, but say
Right.
yes. So,
Yeah, that is correct.
especially as this goes along, it's going to get harder. And this is not a judgment of them, just this tidal wave of applications is going to come to them. Make it easy for them to process yours.
Right. I fully agree with that statement. And I think, as of today or as of yesterday, I'm sorry, the latest data from Customs said that about 20% of eligible entries had a claim filed on them. So that's a little lower than I expected. I thought we would see a very big push at the beginning of the program because the ACE portal where the claims are filed has been fairly stable. There's been a few lag times. I say that, but of course, as of about 2 o'clock yesterday, some of the functionality has gone down and they're working to restore it. One of the key ones being the report functionality. So as of 2 o'clock Eastern yesterday, that stopped working. And as of just before this call, continued to not be available. So we think that'll be back up and running soon. They've been good about that. But right, provide them with good due diligence, screened information. Because again, Customs is a law enforcement agency. You don't want to make what would appear to be a false claim. They're pretty overwhelmed right now, but they are going to do audits once this is all done. And conceivably, again, this is if an importer filed a claim that should not have gone through, Customs can come back and demand repayment or demand more
Yeah.
information to support it. As of right now, they're not doing that. I think they are over their heads with just trying to move through the
Well,
court order.
I mean, as you said, this is not a customer service operation, it's a law enforcement
Correct.
function. So
Always.
that has been
Yes.
thrust into a difficult job. I mean, this
Yes.
they didn't ask for this, but
Yes.
okay. We've got another question. I'm going to kind of paraphrase a little bit from one of our attendees. Can you describe, Steve, for those people who want to say, okay, this isn't something I can take on. I want to get expert help. I want to get a broker to help me with this. What is customary for a customs broker to set up for a fee schedule? What should you expect to be typical in the way that a customs broker would respond if you reached out to them?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see, the term I've used a lot is it's kind of the Wild West. Um, there have been companies that incorporated in the last few months strictly for the purpose of assisting in this refund process because we're talking about a lot of money, 100 and, like I said, 160 billion on the low end. Um, some of those companies are totally above board and doing it right. Some are, maybe not. Anytime you're moving that kind of money around, the risk of fraud is there. I think, most importers probably have a good relationship with their customs broker. If they don't, they really need to develop that. You want to be able to reach out to your broker and get answers. I mean, they're really your partner in all of this. So as far as fees go, I've seen everything quoted from a percentage of the recovery to a per entry that is processed type fee. For us, we have mostly been a per entry fee. And it's reasonable, I think. I think for us, it averages a very small percentage of the overall refund. But I've seen companies demanding or requesting or stating that they wanted 20% of the recovery. Um, there is a lot of work involved. I think that's been one of the misconceptions. I've seen a couple of attorneys that put out newsletters saying, "Oh, this is easy peasy. Everyone should do it themselves." don't need your broker, don't really need anyone to help. You should just do it. My first thought was, why is an attorney saying that? Because it didn't sound like good legal advice. And I think the point was the attorneys expect people are going to muddy this mess up and then have to come to them for more expensive guidance. Let's put it that way. So I
Well,
think, yeah, go
and
ahead.
all of our members are going to have to decide, make this decision based on some complicated things, but
Sure.
whether or not they have the energy to take this on, whether they have the confidence, and whether they have the staff,
Right.
and that's a whole bunch of things. If you were a retailer reaching out to a customs broker, how would you ask them in order to get the very best value to make sure you're getting the work you want for a fair price? How would you ask a customs broker to structure the fee arrangement so you're confident that you're getting the best work and value you can get?
I think the key, and I'll go through the process as I do it with customers that approach me. I filed claims for customers we have now and for customers we're hoping to bring on board. The key is going to be first identifying how much duty is involved. What's the total recovery? And that will be through the ACE report. The broker could guide you in preparing that reporting in ACE. It is a little bit wonky, if we could use that term. So once we can identify the number of entries involved and the amount of duty recovery involved, as a broker, then I would quote based on what I estimate my time is going to be worth for handling that. Some customers push back and say, I'm not willing to pay that, but I'm willing to pay this. We're always open to that. I believe that there should be that kind of rapport. This is new to all of us. Customs entry fees, I think we all know where they've been. They haven't moved a whole lot over the years, but this is totally a new process. So I would say if you're going to get a quote, be able to provide the report showing the total IEEPA duties you anticipate recovering, total number of entries involved, and then listen to their quote and always feel free to push back or shop around. I mean,
Yeah, but
I would
you
just,
raised a good point, Steve.
sure.
Having the information that says here is what
Yes.
we think we're going to be claiming
Right.
enables a more informed discussion for both of
Absolutely.
you.
Right.
So, as opposed to, just, I don't know, like if you're calling a real estate agent and said, I have a house, well,
How much?
you're
Yeah.
going to
What
need
is it?
more detail than that,
Yes. Yes. And I
And
think it
so,
should be open communications. I think if you go to a company and they're unwilling to move from their fee structure and you don't feel that it's comfortable or fair, I would move on at that point.
okay. Yeah, yeah, okay. I mean, as you said, this is the Wild West. There is no playbook for this,
Right.
but
Right.
have the information, have a quality discussion, push back, ask good questions and push back if you're not comfortable. Enable the
Always.
broker to be able to respond to you well.
Yes. The-
So,
yeah, the
okay,
same when you're getting a broker for your import clearances. You should have that negotiation and that discussion, and make sure you feel comfortable with the rate you're getting, and you feel comfortable with the broker you're using, that they're informed and will keep you informed.
okay, okay. We had a very specific question, Stephen. I don't know if you'll know anything about this. One of our attendees said, we have used FedEx as our custom broker for all customs filings. Do we have to do anything for a refund or will FedEx take care of that themselves?
That's a good question, and really it begs another question. The question is, who was the importer of record? If the company that gave us this question was actually legally the importer of record, they need to take action just like they would otherwise. They have to
Okay,
file their refund claims. If FedEx was the importer of record, which they are in some cases, and they may have billed the customer for duty, that's going to be more of a business discussion where they should reach out to FedEx and say, we had these shipments, we see this tariff was paid, we know you're able to recover that now. How are you going to compensate us? That should be
that's a
the
great
conversation.
answer. Yeah, no, that's a great answer because what you're really saying is that's the wrong question. The right question is who's the importer of record? It
always go
really
back to
doesn't matter
the
who FedEx,
right.
big, beautiful company and all, but
Yeah,
who's the importer of record? That's the only thing
correct.
that matters.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful question there. Okay. So Steve, is there anything, this is a little bit of a funny question, but looking ahead, is there anything that we're learning from this, like the way people should change their business practices in the future in purchasing, vendor communications, record keeping, so they're better positioned for tariff related issues? Because tariffs has been such a dynamic topic for over a year now. It's reasonable to assume we might have this on another set of tariffs in the future, or maybe we never will. What should people be doing today so they're not caught quite as off guard?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges a lot of companies are running into, I've talked to some of my customers, even companies that are larger and have very robust record keeping, they didn't really break down the duties that they were paying. In other words, they didn't break apart the regular duty versus the IEEPA duty versus the steel duty. So they really didn't know going in how much money could be coming back to them. Now, ACE is a US customs system, should be totally reliable, the data. I will say, unfortunately, I've already run into a few cases where the data from customs doesn't match the data from the importer. Maybe a few entries weren't on the customs list. So if an importer doesn't have a good list of their own to compare against what they generate from ACE, there's a chance duties could be missed and that will be lost at that point. So going forward, here's what I recommend. First off, every importer needs an ACE account. It's required for any future refunds. Customs no longer
Yeah.
will send refund checks. It's all electronic through ACH refund, and that can only be set up through the ACE portal. Every importer needs an ACE account, and every importer needs to take the time to learn how to use the ACE portal, how to create reports where they can segregate the different types of duties. Their broker or a consultant could definitely help guide them in structuring reports that they might want to run monthly, quarterly, even annually that would enable them to break their duty down because there's so many different duties that apply now. And the potential for more in the future is definitely there.
There's definitely some learnings. We may never be have to apply them again in the future, but
Good to be
let's
prepared.
be better prepared because
Yes,
this very well could happen in the near future again. So
sure.
we just got another question, and we did speak to this at the beginning of the webinar, but it really does bear repeating. So one of our listeners said, as a small store retailer who is not the importer of record, how can we request a refund of tariff fees from our suppliers who were the importer of record? Most of our invoices included a listed tariff, so we have good records of tariffs we paid to our suppliers. And at the beginning of this, we talked about this briefly. We said if you're the importer of record, that's what the entire refund process applies to. If you are the customer of the importer of record, but you may, as this question describes, have very well documented invoice lines that say, this is the surcharge we're charging you, reflecting that tariff, you still are not the importer of record. So capturing your share, if you will, of the monies that your supplier is going to get in this refund process is a business relationship question. It's your relationship with that supplier. That's a conversation that you should begin having today. Now, keep in mind, the vast majority of them have not seen dollar one yet, but you should
Right.
start creating an understanding of how that is going to be handled. There's actually another question that may be part of our conversations in the future, which is what about your customers? You, as the retailer, your customers that come forward and say, I think I paid more for a sofa because of tariffs. And I know that someone got refund money. Where's mine? That's a third conversation for another time. But again, to
So,
reiterate, If you're
Yeah.
not the importer of record and you're not getting the refund, this is a business relationship between you and the company that imported the product that is your business partner. I mean, you're doing business with them now or were. You should be having that conversation with them. There is not going to be a court ruling that entitles you to money. It'll be a business relationship issue.
Yeah, and I'm already hearing from some of my customers who are as importers of record are getting ready to receive refunds. They already have some of their larger customers who have put them on notice saying, "We know we paid extra duties on these products," and they're even demanding that the importer provide some sort of breakdown of how much of the price was made up of the IEEPA tariff. So it's going to be a bit of a bookkeeping nightmare, but I think, especially your larger customers, they're going to demand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that we can be certain of, absolutely
Yes,
certain of.
right.
But as this question was asked from the retailer's perspective, in other words, you should you are not going to be the only person asking this question.
Correct.
And your suppliers will likely have at least the beginnings of a prepared answer for you. But initiate those conversations now.
Yeah.
Steve, before we wrap up, is there one final piece of advice that you'd give retailers as they think about tariff refunds and the steps they should be taking now that we haven't covered, and we've covered a lot today so far?
Yeah, I think it's multi-part. So I think it's critical that they identify if they paid any IEPA duties that are eligible for refund. If they're an importer of record, it's very likely they paid at least some IEPA duties. They were that broad based. So identify, and then you need to pursue those refunds. The money will not be automatically sent to you. That was discussed originally in the courts, and the court pretty much said that would be a nightmare. The government can't handle that. So it's up to you. We've invalidated the tariffs. Now you need to reach out and collect your refund. So identify, pursue those refunds. If you are not the importer, as we spoke about, if you're a retailer, you would want to initiate a conversation now with the people you bought from who did pay the tariff and see what their plan is, how they'll share that
Yeah.
returned money with you. And the final word of advice, I touched on a little bit already. If you are an importer, have that ACE portal, and make sure you're using it to track the future duties that you pay in case we're back at another
Yeah.
crossroad like this in the future. And one last thing I would touch on. I think it would be good if you're not the importer, if you are buying from a party that is the importer, for the future, you might want to build in your contract, please break out the duty costs, which they should be able to do in most cases, on the purchase order or the purchase price that we're paying, and then keep those records in case down the road again, we're here again, and you're trying to reach out and recover money that you didn't pay directly to customs, but you paid to the actual importer.
Yeah, we learned some of these skills as we were getting diesel surcharges in the past. And of course, they're starting to come back, of course, but um, you would rather have that as a separate line, a surcharge, than rolled into the cost of the product because for record keeping, recovery, or just classification of costs, there's benefits to doing it that way. And this
Very
is a prime example of that as well. Steve, we keep getting, when we do these webinars, we normally get maybe a couple questions, say maybe two, frequently none. These just keep rolling in. It just shows
well.
how
That's
hot
great.
this topic is and how much
That's
help
great. I
our
appreciate
members
it. I
need.
appreciate
So let me ask you a couple of more. So, is there an ACE support number to call to resolve multiple tickets that were closed to solve our issues of not seeing our entry information in our ACE account?
Yes, there is a number. It's an 866 number. I don't have it in front of me, but you can Google ACE CBP support phone number and it'll come right up. It's an 866 phone number. The problem being there are very long wait times. So anticipate that. Customs did have an ACE support email that used to be very responsive. That all fell apart when when this program launched. They're basically giving you a canned reply that says call us if it's urgent. So, and when you
Oh, well.
call, you could wait a long time. I would recommend, I've tried calling first thing in the morning. I think the help desk starts at 8 a.m. Eastern. I called early and only waited 10 minutes versus people I've talked to that got called at noon and were cut off at 5 o'clock when the phone shut down, and they still hadn't talked to a human. So,
I mean, this is like calling the airline during a terrible weather event. I mean,
yeah,
you expect
it is
that, but
challenging. That's one of the
can
challenges.
can you repeat the search terms for people who are looking for that 866
Oh,
number?
yes, I would just send this is what I do when I don't have it handy. I would just in Google or whatever search engine you use, put CBP, that stands for Customs and Border Protection, and then put ACE, support phone number, and should come up first in the search.
Okay. What is your thought on technology platforms that seem to be popping up to help people recover refunds? Have you seen much of
Yes,
that?
yeah. Actually, I have, and I've also seen a number of companies that either are newly formed or some that are branching out that are offering like an audit service, possibly where they're auditing an importer's entries to determine if they received all of potential IEPA refunds. Um, I don't really, I don't want to throw a negative view of a business that is trying, I believe, trying to support importers. I'm just not sure I see the necessity for it. If you have a good relationship with your customs broker, they should be able to guide you through the process, and they should be able to help you identify and claim all your eligible refunds. I don't know that a deep dive audit, which could be quite costly, is necessary. Now, I will throw in general, customs compliance is a critical part of importing. You're dealing with law enforcement. So it would not hurt a separate conversation outside of the IEPA refunds is to look at the compliance processes you have in place as an importer and how you and your broker communicate to make sure you're classifying your products correctly, you're declaring your values correctly. Everything is, I's are dotted, T's are crossed. You don't want customs to audit you. That is like an IRS audit. It's pretty horrendous.
I think that's an intuitive statement, Steve.
Yeah,
Yes.
audit's never a good thing.
Well, I want to talk to our audience for a moment. As you can see, early on in this emerging tariff process, more than a year ago, HFA assembled a small team of people who communicates to our membership relentlessly, trying to do everything we can to help you understand this, predict what would happen next, describe the very best business practices, help you drive your business. Um, it is it is what HFA does when we have an opportunity like this for all the wrong reasons, but an opportunity nonetheless to add value to our members. It is a wonderful thing when we can do things that are difficult for you to do by yourself. And this is certainly a prime example. Early on in that process, Steve slowly worked his way into that team with us. He has been a fantastic colleague and contributor with a unique set of skills relative to the rest of us, the small group of us who work on this daily, in order to help all of you with these very, very challenging situations. So, Steve, you've been a great colleague, supporter. Thank you very, very much. And I appreciate your being here today. We'd also like to thank Synchrony for sponsoring our webinars, and they continually support this on our just regular webinars, ones like this that are more focus specific and reflect an opportunity. They have been a very good partner all along. Our next webinar is Thursday, May 14th. This webinar will be about AI and the new digital storefront. We hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone.